Hey, welcome to the Cam and Odo Show, and thank you, Mystery Zoom Voice, for letting us know that we are
Mm.
recording. Yes, always got it. It is strange. It's so Big Brother,
It
and
it is very Big Brothery. That's why it freezes us every time.
I don't know if kids are still being required to read it, but for those of you who ain't read 1984, well, it didn't happen in 1984, but it sure feels like it might be happening right about now. So you might want to pick it up and just see what Mr. Orwell predicted, what, 60, 70 years ago,
Mhm.
however my math works out when he wrote it. Uh, it is a great book.
Oh
But
yeah.
anyway, endeavor to persevere if Big Brother is watching, because perseverance is about not letting things stop you. If you want to do and accomplish something, persevere. If you really do, persevere to achieve it. And don't let Big Brother stop you,
Or anyone
or anyone, or
for that
thing.
matter.
Yeah, yeah. And in case you ain't listened to Perseverance Week 1, jump back there after you listen to this one, because you might catch us repeating, but I hope not, because you know what we're going to do? We're going to do story time,
Hmm.
because there's no better way to really understand a concept than how it applies in a story. Thank you, Don Miller. Shout out to Business Made Simple, building your story brand. We both fans of Don and his team, but yeah, a story. So, the one that pops in my head is during the Q course. One of my favorite times uh, in my life. Notice I said one of my favorite candidates, so don't get all, what about me, Dad? Uh, but the Q course, Q stands for qualification, because we're very technical in the military. So Q stands for qualification. And during the Q course, we would do multiple events and things like that. And one of the great ones, one of the ones that I really was challenged physically and mentally, was called the Troy Trek. And what the Troy Trek was, they do something very similar. I don't know if they still call it that or not. But really, the reason it was called the Troy Trek is because it was done in the Troy National Forest in North Carolina, uh, which I didn't know when I was doing the Troy Trek. I was just, okay, Troy Trek, let's go.
Oh, it was a
Uh,
history lesson or something.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like, Trojan horse, the battle for Troy. I was like, okay, cool. That's us. No, it's something, again, simplicity, military.
Hmm.
It's in the Troy National Forest. So, but what Troy Trek was a combination of an ultra marathon and an orienteering course
Hmm.
and a skills test, all wrapped up into one. Oh! Don't forget, you're being hunted. So the whole thing is you are to go from point A to point B, accomplish the task at point B when you get there, and then get your assignment for the next point,
Hmm.
and then do it again and do it again without knowing how many you're going to do. You're doing 5, you're doing 10. The only thing you knew was that this event lasted somewhere between 60 and 96 hours. I think, no, I take that back. I think it was actually on the schedule for 108 hours or something like that. 5 days. So you had no idea how long it actually lasted.
Hmm.
And on top of that, you had no idea how many points you had. And then add in the fact that the instructors are driving around in their pickup trucks with bullhorns looking for you. And if you get caught, by the way, did I mention that you're wearing an orange vest on the back of your rucksack so that if you do get hurt, you can get found easier? which also makes it easier for the instructors to find you. If you get caught, you get sent back to the last point that you were at. So think about that going forward. And I think Camden just froze up again. For those of you in Tucson, we feel for you. You apparently the speedy internet has not reached Tucson yet. So if you think back to how, and now I'm doing it solo, that's okay. You get caught, you have to go back to the last point you were at. And if and I didn't mention, you can't use the roads. You're not supposed to use the roads because what are the instructors doing? Some of them are walking around in the bushes, but generally speaking, they're driving in the pickup trucks up and down the road looking for you. You get disqualified. You get caught walking along the road. So all these sort of things. And oh, by the way, these skills tests at each point are graded. They're evaluated. And so not only do you not know how many points there are, you don't know how fast you have to go between these points. You don't know if it's going to end at 72 hours or 96 hours or 120 hours. You don't know that. All you know at the beginning is here's your first point, and then the final instruction was do the best that you can. And what this was a mental and physical challenge that every student had to go through. And in my course, in my class, there was about 30 of us, and 20 of them did not successfully negotiate that event, and got to spend another 3 or 4 weeks retraining and catching up with the class behind us. And what it was, that mental game, because some of the points had instructors at them, to hand you the test that you had to take, and some of them were just an ammo can that you had to find. You never knew what the standards were. And this is something I've talked about with clients and other folks that I talk to, and I probably have talked to it in one of my videos. If I hadn't, remind me of that one, Camden, for Whiskey Words, plug there. There is no standard in life. The only standard in life is the one that you set for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that was the great thing about Troy Trek, because we wanted people who held themselves to a higher standard, a higher level of performance. And that's it was all on your own. And in order to be a great member of a team, you have to be great individually and able to perform as an individual, as well as you have to perform as a team member. That's my Troy Trek story about why it's there, the mental challenge of it, which I really, out of everything we did, that was in 6 months of this qualification course. That's still one of my fondest memories. I could tell you various things that did and happened during that. And then I don't even remember what some of the other training events were in that 6 months. It's amazing, because it was just such a powerful personal challenge for me to do that and succeed at it, to persevere through that unknown that I had to overcome.
I think that's a really interesting thing there, because my big takeaway, you said it clearly of your instructions were to do the best you can. But one of the things I was picking up during the story is you really had nothing to measure yourself off of. nothing to measure your performance, nothing to measure your pace, nothing to measure, anything as far as it's going. And I think that's a really interesting place to be when you're talking about performance, because you're only able to measure it against yourself and your perceptions of things. And then you get into this whole weird space where, I think people, I think it's David Goggins says you hit that mental barrier at 40% of the 100% of what you can actually do. I think I got those numbers right. But and not like those are super scientific.
Either David or Jesse Itzler. I don't remember which one. Jesse
Either
Itzler,
way.
David. So
either way, some number where it's, you could push yourself past this. And that's the really interesting thing there, is when we measure ourselves off of things, you can often sell yourself short because you hit that benchmark and then you don't push yourself anything past it. It's, if y'all don't believe me, do a little test right now, unless you're driving your car, of course, pause the podcast, go down and try to do 50 push-ups. Just go for 50, because I know you could do 50. I'll give a little bit of positive reinforcement right there. I don't know how many you're actually going to hit when you come back and hit play on the podcast again, but I can tell you that you'll do more than if you had tell yourself to just do 20 and then said, no, I could do 20 more. No, I could do 10 more. You're going to hit the 50 much easier when that's what you're measuring off of. It's the same type of thing. If you're a personal trainer or a rugby coach, one of your favorite things to do is to mislead people about how long is left in workouts. And you go through and they're running their sprints here, guys, come on, halfway done. We got this, man. You guys are going to run for another 25 minutes. Like, and that the whole way, but you give them a benchmark to go, okay, no, I can keep going. Or, you let the time go for 2 minutes when you said you'd only go for a minute, because they only think it's going to be a minute. So in their mind, they think they can handle it, but you wind up pushing it a little bit further because they don't know what to measure themselves. So you're able to push them off of it and get them to reach that level of performance that they didn't think they had inside of themselves. And, when you talk about it in terms of the Q course, it's a selection thing of you're trying to find people who are able to push themselves based on that internal measurement rather than based on the external measurement. Because when it comes down to it, and, you could tell another story of any crazy circumstance you've been in, you had to measure your performance off of yourself, not off of anything else inside that situation. And if you had started measuring it off of the guy next to you, you might not have made it out of that situation. And so, to bring that back, what it reminds me so much of, I know this is such a different example, is going back to coaching rugby and those type of things. When you do fitness tests, there's always a handful of guys on a team who will ask for their times when they're coming around. There's other people who just go and they just run. And they will run and they will push themselves so much further, whether or not they heard a time or not. And then there's other people who they have to hear the time in order to be able to push themselves because they don't have that kind of internal measurement. They're, much more extrinsically motivated. And so what you're able to measure there with your Troy Trek is the intrinsic motivation of how hard do you want to push yourself to become the best that you can be? Not just, can you beat this test? It's about being able to beat yourself in that sense and to be able to push yourself further than you thought you could.
Oh yeah, that's great, and it just reminded me you were talking about the fitness training. When I was coaching, I did that several times, and all right, last one, and then we did 5 more, just to see who could handle it, because that's one of the neat things about rugby, because it doesn't stop at the 80-minute or the talking halfway, the 40-minute. And one of the greatest teams in the world, consistently, the All Blacks. I'd love to see the data on how many tries or just points they score after the hooter has blown. And for those of you who don't know rugby terminology, that means just the whistle blown for the half or the game, right? But I'd love, because what do? They finish. They don't stop and look at the clock and go, oh, time's up. No, they finish. And that right there is really another great analogy for perseverance, because if their goal is to score and continue to score, their goal isn't to win the game. Their goal is to score. I truly believe that All Blacks, that's the mental attitude they have in that. And because their goal is to score, even if they possess the ball and time is up, they continue to go until they can score. That's a powerful attitude. And if you adopt that attitude in what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, whether it's in business and life, that's a powerful way to look at it, because if you're just saying, well, that's good enough. There, I've achieved that. Well, I've worked on this pretty hard.
Mhm.
Pretty hard ain't going to get it there. I mean, that is not pushing through to achieve what you want to achieve. That's I give it give it the old college try. That was I don't know, cartoon that showed up in cartoons a lot when I was growing up, or maybe even Three Stooges probably. Give it the old college try. Give one for the Gipper, Ronald Reagan as but none of those things work, because it has to be internally driven.
Mhm.
And that internal attitude, as you put it, the intrinsic motivation, when an organization has intrinsic motivation to push themselves to achieve more, man, that's a sign me up. I mean, that's what I did in the Green Berets. I was everybody in that organization had gone through the same trials and tribulations to validate that they were the right fit, that they had enough intrinsic motivation to accomplish the mission.
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is that intrinsic motivation. When you talk about, we defined it last week. Perseverance is maintaining a purpose through difficulties, right? And when you're fixated on that purpose, this is where the intrinsic extrinsic motivation really comes down, because the intrinsic motivation there is that you're wanting to be better. It's all about just becoming better. You're just comparing yourself with who you were yesterday. You're always wanting to do better than you had before. It's not an extrinsic motivation of winning a game or beating the person in front of you. It's, even the All Black example, I would say scoring is much more of an intrinsic than extrinsic, because it's about what you were accomplishing. It's not about beating the other team. You're going to score no matter who's in front of you. It's a concept where it's all internal. You're just wanting to go and push yourself to be better there. And I think that's a really important thing to take away. And you can see, I think sports are probably the best theater to be able to see perseverance and a lot of the traits that we've been talking about, because you can see it in real time as things start to crumble in front of you. You can see who wants to win and who wants to get better. And you can notice it all the time, because the teams who are just there to win, when they don't think they can win anymore, they stop playing hard. It's in the middle of the NHL playoffs right now. We could pull out any number of games for teams that fell apart on it. Hell, our Washington Capitals, who we like to watch, they freaking fell apart. That in the end of their series, you could tell that very few people on the ice looked like they believed they could win anymore. Mm-hmm. There were some guys out there that were still going out and they're playing hard, but you could tell for some of the people, the belief just wasn't there. The Toronto Maple Leafs are an even worse example, because they completely imploded from a 3-1 lead. But if you watch that last game, I'm not sure if you watched Game 7, we haven't talked about it, but they didn't want to be there. Nobody wanted to be there. You could tell that none of their players wanted to be there. They had quit. The extrinsic motivation rather was completely gone, and they didn't have anything intrinsic to push them further. Now, to give a little pat on the back, Colorado Avalanche last night, that was some perseverance. You could see they were bending, but not breaking. And to go from that to a point where you're saying, look, the fact is, you can lay out all the stats. I know the announcers were saying I think there was a while there, 20-30 minute period where the Avalanche were outshot 20-3 or something like that.
Yeah. From the second period till the Avalanche scored the game winner in overtime. Yep. That's pretty much.
And here's the thing. It's a weird, stats are great. Stats are super great, but they don't tell the whole story in a lot of sports. We're not talking baseball where you can pinpoint just about everything that's just precisely happened based off the stats. This is hockey. And the fact is, yeah, you can say if a goalie has a 98% save percentage and then you need to shoot, 100 times to be able to score 2 goals. And so you got to go and you got to shoot. Fact is, it only takes 1. And the Avalanche were getting completely steamrolled in that sense. But every time they got the puck and they started moving forward, they were looking to go score. They were looking to connect on their passes, and they were looking to go, because we just need 1 rush. And that's what it wound up being on the end there. They drew a penalty, had some great possession in the offensive zone, and they were able to get to a point where it's a one-on-one opportunity, Mikko Rantanen and the goalie, and he was able to get past him, just freaking barely, but that's all you need. And so when you're persevering, that's what you're looking for. It's just that one little thing that's going to give in order for you to get through this. No matter how bad it is coming in front of you, you got to recognize what the situation really is. You're not playing for shots. You're not playing for hits. You're not playing for possession. We're playing for goals. And that's how it turned out. And you got to have that kind of a mindset when you're playing in there.
Yeah. Well, and man, yeah, the whole body language thing. I love that as a coach and, as a fan of the game, you see that, and it's just an amazing thing. And when you are that coach and it's your team, or you're that CEO or founder and it's your team, and they're down and out, and they're frustrated because you've submitted 4 proposals, you've made pitches to 6 or 7 different investors, and they're all like, nice job, I appreciate your time, and pat you on the back, and that's all you walk away with. That's where you as a leader have to step in and be that one that sets the example. And it's a hard thing to do. This sucks, and I know it sucks, but if we do these things, we can get out of the suck and fix it and get to that point where we can celebrate. We can have win parties. That used to be back in the day. That used to be stuff we did in the government contracting world. Because when Uncle Sam says, "Hey, you won this $300 million 5-year contract," that's worth a party. Let me tell you.
Oh yeah.
But it's that sort of sense of driving through those frustrations, those obstacles, those defeats, those losses, in order to achieve the outcome, the goals, the vision that you have. It takes that perseverance. Hell, if it didn't take perseverance, would it be worth it? There's a counterintuitive thing for you. If you could just wave your little magic wand, what was it, Harry Potter wand, or I was thinking more like Bewitched, showing from and not that weird one that's going on now, but the real one, with Darren and Samantha, and twinkle twinkle your nose and have whatever. Is it really worth it? Does it mean as much? Probably not. I don't think it does. Because let me tell you, when you earn it, when you truly earn something, when I earned that green beret and they said, "Don your beret," man, that's pretty cool. Because I worked my ass off to get that.
Well,
a lot of different ways.
Let me ask you this then. When you were going through wait, sorry. Oh, you're gonna hate me for this. Q course is part of Green Beret, right? I'm not mixing 2 different schools. Okay. I wasn't sure if I was mixing 2 different schools. There's a lot of acronyms and stuff that you throw at me. But so as you were going through with things like the Troy Trek and other obstacles along that way, was that a moment you were visualizing consciously?
No, it was a step towards the outcome that I wanted to achieve. So it wasn't, I wouldn't even call it, looking back on it, did I look at it as a milestone? Maybe I looked at it as a milestone. Okay, got that out of the way. Knew that there was these significant events throughout the course that were, if you did not successfully complete that thing, you went back or went home, one of the two. And those, when you pass those things, those were not, those things themselves, I don't even think they were, I wouldn't have called them a goal or objective. I call them more of a milestone, because they were steps in the process that needed to be completed in order to achieve the outcome of winning the Green Beret.
So then was the outcome of winning the Green Beret something that you consciously thought of to persevere through those challenges with the Troy Trek and those type of things?
Oh yeah, because it was a personal challenge in each stage, and even to the sense of a little bit of competitiveness even though you didn't know, and and particularly what was going on for who. So staying in the Troy Trek story, you're walking through the woods, and it's not an infinite forest. So there are probabilities that you're going to run across a buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And you run across a buddy, and you're like, dude, what point are you on? Where are you heading? And
he's got letters, you've been getting numbers, and
yeah, even though you're not supposed to talk to anybody, shh, don't tell anybody. I talked to my buddies while I was out in the woods and we were all alone. But you'd find out, yeah, I'm going to my 5th point, and you're like, oh, I'm on number 2. But what you don't know is how many.
Mm-hmm.
He may be going to 15 points to cover 50 kilometers. You may be going to 3 points to cover 50 kilometers. That's the secret of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell anybody that's the secret of it. But when you do that, the mental game, and this is what you were talking about earlier, your mind says, oh crap, am I behind? Because you're starting to compare yourself, your performance and your ability to succeed to somebody else who's on a completely different path to achieve the same outcome. That's an interesting thing to think about. Are you comparing yourself, your progress in your life, your progress in your business to somebody else? Are you trying to keep up with the Joneses with a 4-car garage and still adding on?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough way to judge your life going through.
Oh yeah, no, that's actually exactly where I was going to take that, because when you're measuring against yourself, you're looking at things realistically based on, for lack of a better way to put it, your story, your journey that you've come across. Whether it's in one specific instance, like with the Troy Trek in the Q course, or if you're measuring across your entire life of how you've gotten to this point. And it's a funny thing that we do, and I'm sure you still do it at your age, but this is definitely very much a young person thing of, why aren't I there yet? Well, I should have already hit this point. I should have already hit this point. I should have made so much money. I should have already bought a house. I should have been married. There's people who measure themselves off of all sorts of different things. But the fact is, when you start measuring yourself off of others and others' expectations for your life, you're always going to fall up short, because you're not them. And no matter what, you're not going to be them. And so you have to measure it against yourself. And, you'll still fall short sometimes. That's why you challenge yourself. But it's about measuring against yourself so that you get an honest representation of what the situation looks like, not being there desperate for something that should never actually happen. It's I'll use one, and this isn't an actual example, don't worry. But it's, the equivalent of somebody around my age. Let's say it's a girl, and they're a nice young lady, and they want to have kids. They should have had kids by now. And so they're going to go off and they're going to marry some guy that they don't know crap about. And they're going to start pumping out kids. And then 2 years down the road, they're going to realize that this is the worst decision they've ever made in their life. But they were measuring themselves against their friend who is getting married and having kids. And so they went, oh, I need to go do that. And then their life's going to fall apart because they weren't telling their story. They were trying to tell somebody else's story. So that's kind of an extreme example of accidentally throwing your life away on some, terrible marriage. Hopefully no one listening to this podcast is dealing with that. If you are, call in, we can talk through it. We'll help you. But it's about
the
measuring.
marriage counselor.
Yeah, bring them in. But it's about measuring against yourself, not somebody else. Hell, to keep it in the relationship point, that was one piece of advice you gave me years ago. I don't even remember what the freaking context was of it, but just everyone's relationship is different. Never compare yours to anybody's. Simple thing you probably told me when I was like 13 years old with a 7th grade girlfriend or whatever the hell that, whenever I actually got that advice. But it's one of those things. As you go through life, it's really easy to start to measure yourself with people that you're near, your friends, or people that you spend time with at work and all these different things. But in reality, they're on a completely different journey than you are. So you got to make sure you just keep measuring on yourself and on your own successes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now you just set me up for another Stoic quote of the week.
Let's get it.
By Marcus Aurelius. I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself. Man, yep. Believe me, that is there's a whole lot of coaching going on there in the believing that somebody's thinking something about you and being more worried about what you don't know what they're thinking and just assuming they're thinking that, man. Now, hold your own self accountable, hold your own self to the standards that you set for yourself. You want to be a lazy SOB and that's your standard? Go ahead. Don't call me. You ain't going to be on my team. But if that's who you are and that's how you're happy, good on you. I'm proud of you. Well, I take that back. Not the proud part. If that's who you are, that's who you are.
I was going to say, if you are genuinely happy with that, then I would be proud of you because you found where your happiness is. Now, I would push that probably where you might want to be challenging yourself a little bit more, step outside your comfort zone. But, that's a conversation for another day. Going back, that we're in the Stoic quotes, it's the one that comes to mind. I think it's a Seneca, but it's be strict with yourself and tolerant with others. When it comes down to it, it's your journey. You got to persevere through your own storm. You don't know what somebody else is going through on anything like that. So just measure against yourself. That's the lesson for today, which I can't quite call that my lesson learned for today, but I'll go ahead and throw it over to you. Dad, what did you learn today?
Well, it's just that never thought about Troy Trek as a measure of my intrinsic motivation. And that's what it was. And in the shrink world, I'm sure that's what they, back in the day when whatever sick son of a, what came up with some of the things that we did as a measure. It was truly measuring our intrinsic motivation, how much we held in ourselves in order to overcome whatever it was. Because, man, it wasn't no walk in the beautiful trimmed forest with light. It wasn't. We weren't in Germany and the Bergführers and the I can't think of the Forstmeister's German word, but we weren't there where it's all nice and trimmed and trails. This is nasty dinosaur land is what we called it. I mean, wait a minute vines were wait an hour vines. So in swamps and it's beautiful country. So that's what I learned, Camden. How about you got a reprieve for what you learned?
Oh, well, it's kind of in the same branch of what you were saying there of nothing to measure off of. I think that's such an interesting thing because I'm kind of looking at it from a mechanics point of the mechanism there is you got to take away things that the person can measure themselves off of so that then they are forced to measure off of themselves. And then you can see whether or not they succeed or they fail. So now the lesson here is we got to get, I don't know how they're probably doing it by now, army learns things eventually, but you got to get some psychologists to go out there and start studying why the hell people are doing these different things in these courses. Cause they've obviously worked, but you got to figure out what the heck they're measuring at some point. Right.
I just don't, I was never behind the scenes. They've got a bunch of shrinks that are watching us and we took some tests and weird questions. And I don't even want to go down those. I might have flashbacks. So, they're monitoring them things, believe me. So, man, persevere. And my favorite quote again, endeavor to persevere. So, Camden, run us out.
Persevere through this outro. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your purpose, build your tribe. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.